Hey, thank you for your time. And as ILA launches some new strategies for moving forward as a private pay only, I have watched some of your videos and heard you say, I think I heard you say, that you were with a charter school and then you, for whatever reason, came up against that deal breaker. That's what we keep talking about. There are deal breakers. When you have government funds, you have government restrictions. How far can you take it before it's a deal breaker? How did you get to that point? What was the process?
Well, I think first it's good to know that we were actually with a charter school for 12 years. So it wasn't like I was just in
Oh,
a charter school for a short time. We were charter school families. We were in an independent study charter school. We're down in Orange County. So we started with Julian Charter School, and then we were with some iLead school, and then we were with the Inspire family of schools. And so we loved being a charter school family. We loved the freedom that it used to provide us and the support. We loved
right.
having that credentialed teacher because when I set out to be a homeschool mom, well, when I started being a mom, I never imagined I would be a homeschool mom. I thought he would go to school, my
Me
oldest.
too.
Yeah. So I thought he'd go to school. And then my kids are all 5 years apart. So I thought, oh, how perfect this is. He'll be in kindergarten and then I'll have more time with Hudson. But no,
Yeah.
school didn't work for Athen. And so when I pulled him out, I didn't know what to do. I wasn't confident in my teaching abilities. I wasn't confident in knowing, like, oh, what am I even supposed to do? Like the scope and sequence that you hear all the time. What are they supposed to know? And so I signed up for first a independent study program through the district. And that was immediately too rigid. What they provided us was the curriculum that the district uses, and there was no flexibility in that. We had to get through the curriculum just like they were doing in the classroom. And so if a classroom had worked for him, he would have still been in school. And so we pulled out of that. And that's when I found out about homeschool charter schools. I know they're not called homeschool charter schools. They're called personalized learning or non-classroom based or independent study charter
Right.
schools. But that's when I found about those. And we found an amazing teacher who taught me everything about homeschooling. She was like, no, you don't have to use that kind of curriculum. There's all this homeschool curriculum. Turned me on to Rainbow Resource and Kathy Duffy and all of these places that you can go. But the first thing that she did was spend time talking to me, like over an hour on the phone, asking about Athen and how he learned and what our experience had been. And then she showed up to my house 3 days later with a box of things that she thought would work for him. And they did work for him. It was
Wow.
amazing. It was like she knew my child.
Yeah.
And so I was
Yeah.
sold. And I loved having that support, meeting with her. And she was flexible with me on how it worked at first. So like at first we were given those assignment sheets saying, oh, you need to get through this and this and this. And then
Right.
she realized that that was making me crazy. Like I was like
Right.
to tick off every box and it was taking the fun out of learning. And so she said, you know what, Wendy, I'm not giving you those sheets anymore. I have them. I'll look at them and I'll help you track, but you just go and you follow his interest and you do what he wants to do. And so she basically taught me how to be an unschooler. So my charter school credential teacher taught me how to be an unschooler. And I'm so thankful for that because we jumped right in to following his interests. And that's how we homeschooled for, 12 years. And then the charter school started getting more rigid and we had
And
gone
the deal
on,
breakers.
yeah, we had gone on a road trip across the United States because he's in high school and he was studying US government and US history. And so I decided, he doesn't learn traditionally. He's not going to read a book. He'll read a book, but not a textbook. He's
Right.
not going to do it the traditional way. And so I said, let's just get
Right.
in the car and go. Like that's one of the things about homeschooling you can do. You get in the car and you go. So we drove all the way across the United States, stopped and looked at all kinds of things, ended up in Washington, D.C. And what the school came back with was that New York and all those places was that that wasn't acceptable. Any papers that he wrote about that experience weren't acceptable. He had to do the assignments that were part of their A through G outline. And,
For the
all the
unit.
students, yeah.
Unit.
And I was like, well, he's been learning this way his whole life. I'm not going to stop and make him now go back and learn a way that I know didn't work for him way back in kindergarten. Like now that he's explored the world and learned in his own way, I'm not bringing him back to this old method that doesn't work. And why do we need to get more rigid with our children when we don't know what the future holds, and they should have open minds and open spirits to do whatever it is that their heart wants them to do. So yeah, that was the deal breaker, telling me that I had to go back to the old way of doing things that I already knew didn't work.
Yeah. It's really common for us at ILA because we've seen so many kids go through programs and watch them graduate, go through high school, all that stuff, that we actually tell parents with a charter school, you have pretty much the freedom to pick and choose up until seventh grade begins. By the time you hit ninth grade is where you will feel boxed in
Right.
to get your high school units. And that's when we start to see parents really have their anxiety and pressure feeling of, I must check these boxes in this way.
Right.
That's when we see that start to turn around. And that's when we see most homeschoolers, if they're going to drop off, they're going to drop off at high school because it feels too overwhelming. So how did you make that transition?
So my younger two, so they're 5 years apart. So they were, I don't even know what grade they were in, but they stayed that year. Like Athen pulled out first, and then even got too rigid for them. It was like, so my kids had like opted out of testing for many years because, as you know, that's our right to opt out of testing, but it does impact the school negatively. And there's no real like guidance. Like if we don't show up, do they get a 0? How are they graded if we don't show up and we opt out? So there's all of these.
I have a question for you on that. Not to go down a rabbit trail, but do we still have that right with new legislation to opt out of testing? Because when I read what was passed on July 9th, it very much seems that the direction that the charters are going is that there will be many more benchmarks expected to hit, and they're going to expect those benchmarks through testing. And if you don't test, and can't demonstrate that benchmark, you can't take enrichment classes. So is that still our right to opt out? I don't actually know.
So I'm talking about the standardized state testing, which we can legally have the right to opt out of.
Okay, good.
But those benchmark tests, the schools want you to do them. And really, if you're going to be part of a charter school, it's good to know that they need that, and they need it for getting authorized. They need it for their state dashboard, for information to prove that your students are learning. So if you want to be in a charter, jump through those hoops. But Athen had opted out of standardized testing because of major anxiety issues. And so I always appreciate it.
I had 2 that were fine and 1 that couldn't take it.
Right. And so I appreciate a school that is respectful of the child's needs over what they need for their dashboard or for their authorization, because they should be able to say, well, we have special needs students, or we have students that we couldn't accommodate with the test in this way. And so they opted out, and those students shouldn't be counted against them. I don't, I needed it.
So then so how old is your oldest now? How long has it been since you were with that charter school?
He will be 18, I think, next week. And let's see, we pulled out, I want to say we pulled out 2.5 years ago. So he pulled out mid-year. And then the younger 2 pulled out the next year.
Okay. So is he graduated, or will he graduate this year?
Well, I ended up holding him back a year. And that's another thing that the charter schools give us a really hard time about, that they didn't used to give us a hard time about. So he was my first child, and I didn't realize that, I should keep him back a year because he has an August birthday. And so at Julian, he was progressing okay, but he was super shy, had major anxiety. He wouldn't even talk to his teacher. Like, she was the most amazing, wonderful person. Aww. He was so shy. He like would hide between my legs or like by me. Yeah. So she could see like the work he was. Yeah, she could see the work he was doing. She could see that he was engaging with me, but he clearly was a little behind emotionally. And so she just watched him, and he probably wasn't working at grade level. And so she supported me in getting all the documentation, and the school let us hold him back in 3rd grade. They put him back to 2nd grade. So he'll be graduating 1 more year.
Yeah.
Wisdom lawyer.
And I just want to applaud you and say that right there is one of my favorite things about when you're a homeschooling parent. You, as the parent, can recognize my child has all the abilities in this area and all the skills, but they're struggling over here, which doesn't mean they're behind. It means they're not up here.
Right,
They're developing all those skills and they don't develop linear in a linear fashion. And so give them a little more time to get there and they will excel everywhere.
right.
And so I just think that's a beautiful thing. And we are seeing again, particularly in the high school years, we're seeing more and more where the charter schools are putting restrictions on when you can take certain core subjects, which
Yeah,
is ridiculous. I
yeah, it's
said it.
ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
When they can take their math, when they can take certain histories. And if they've already taken it because they're ahead, they can't count it towards their
Can't
units.
count it. Yeah.
That I have seen a number of students have to retake a math or biology
Yeah.
class because they took it as an eighth grader because they're accelerated.
Okay, well,
And
go take it at a
that's what we
community
want our
college,
kids
and
to
then you get
do.
the college credit for it, and it doesn't matter what your dumb school says.
Right, right. That's right. Yeah. It's really
And they'll let
crazy.
you take a community college even before you're in high school. So a community college course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are, ILA is a big proponent of dual enrollment. I
Yeah.
think that it's a game changer for people. It's a confidence builder. It's a
Yeah.
money saver. It's a like a scaffolding framework of security.
Right.
It's good. It's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah. Not for everybody, but for a lot of kids, we're a big proponent. So as you switched, did you have anxiety around that? Did you feel concerned about giving up the funds? Because that's of course always the number one question is how am I going to pay for anything? How am I going to graduate my kids if I don't have the funds?
Well, like you just said,
What's
going
your
to
response to
community
that?
college is very cheap. So, Athens taking community college classes, Hudson's taking community college classes. And honestly, I think we get tied up in that we need those funds. And so many of the things we do can be found free online, free at the library, free out in the world. So I we actually weren't using all of our funds. So it wasn't a big deal for me to give up the funds. So I think we're kind of more wrapped up in the idea that we need those funds and we're not necessarily taking advantage of all the free things. And of course, the classes that like ILA are going to cost money, but you can budget for those things that are important to you and then, find free curriculum online. On my website, Homeschool Concierge, we have a whole list of free resources for homeschooling that families can tap into and use and not have to spend, hundreds to thousands of dollars on curriculum. And then just prioritize your classes and do free field trips. And do you remember a time, Michelle, when homeschool moms would just jump in and plan the field trips and do the field trips and then pay each other instead of using like field trip vendors? Like, I love that. That's
Yes.
actually Homeschool Concierge we have a field trip program where we'll help moms who don't have the money. It's our ambassador program where we'll help them plan the field trip and we'll upfront the money for the field trip and collect the money so they don't have to worry about any of that, but they lead the field trip. And so I set that up as a support to help more homeschool moms be able to do field trips. But now I feel like we all rely on other vendors to do all of those types of things. So like all of our homeschool centers
That's
down
how
here.
I got my whole community.
Right.
Was that our whole community was about, we didn't have funds because even the place where we were taking classes was faith-based. So we couldn't use any charter dollars, but we wanted those extra things. We wanted the classes. And so we would be in the classroom teaching things, or we would be creating field trips or community events or spaghetti dinners or whatever, so that we got to know each other. And then you find your people, the like-minded ones, the same grade, the same kind of personalities. And that's how you really grow your community in sharing who you are and what you have without money, just what's around you. What do you bring?
Right.
It's beautiful. Yeah. So I definitely remember. And I, like you, have been with a charter, have not been with a charter, have been in a full program that is run by the Office of Education.
Yeah.
I have seen charters change. So we went through 4 different charter schools because the teacher is everything, as you said. And now ILA our admin team and instructors have such an amazing accumulative wisdom because we've seen it all,
Yeah.
right? We've watched everybody from full on private affidavit, don't even talk to me about anything, super structured, super intentional, to the unschooler
Right.
and everything in between.
Yeah.
And so it's been really great. And that's where we feel like we're in a position to be that resource, like your teacher was for you,
Right.
and say, we've got a box of stuff for you, and we've got all kinds of resources for you, and we can hook you up with the homeschool concierge, and you can find free stuff and more
Right.
information, and you don't have to be right here. We have the internet.
Yeah.
So all those things are really great. And we
Even,
find ourselves in a
yeah.
position to need to encourage them to cut the ties.
Yeah. Right.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's
Well,
okay.
and even like if you haven't found your people yet, walking them through how you set up a park day, how you post on Facebook that you're doing it and invite other people until you find the people you want to hang out with. We do have so many resources and so many social events for our families, but maybe none of them fit what your children and you need. Well, start your own. Right.
Right. Amen.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And so the last thing I would really love for you to speak into is, again, I think that within the homeschool community, there is a wave of people who are like me. I never intended or expected to homeschool,
Right.
and they are running away from some sort of problem or deal breaker or scenario that doesn't work for them or for their child, whatever it is. I mean, it can be bullying, it can be the drive, it can be the hours, it can be the homework, it can be the curriculum, all of those things, whatever it is, it's not working. So there's this wave of people leaving traditional brick and mortar school and coming into homeschooling. And because we get to talk to so many of them, it's amazing how many of them believe already before they ever get started that they need to be with a charter in order to homeschool.
Oh,
And
really?
then they find ILA and they want to take these classes and use voucher dollars. And not all of them have even been able to get in with a homeschool, or excuse me, with a charter school. They're on
Right.
a wait list,
Right.
but they feel so strongly this belief that if I don't have a charter, I can't do it. Then we have people who have been with a charter that think if that goes away, I can't do it. What changes are you seeing for people in charter school that they need to be aware of, that they need to pay attention to, because they're just listening to kind of the underground background noise of everybody who homeschools with a charter, but they don't recognize the changes that's
Well,
happening
I think it's like
right
putting a
before
frog
our
in
eyes.
boiling water and they jump out. But if you put the frog in the water and then turn it on to a boil, they
Right.
stay in. So we think we need it, and we just keep putting up with these incremental changes that are strangling us and our children. And we don't jump out of the boiling water. But I think that the light bulb that went off for me was when I realized, like, I actually think that here in America, we're taught as parents that once our children is 5 or 6, we have to hand them over to a credentialed teacher because that's the only person that can pass knowledge on to a child, which simply is not
Mhm.
true. And but yet we
Of
believe
course.
it. Like, we are the ones who taught our children everything from the ages 0 to 5. So why do we suddenly believe that we can no longer pass knowledge on to our children? And my favorite thing about homeschooling is exploring things that, yeah, I don't know, and my kids want to learn, and we learn it together. I feel like it gives us such a connection as a family that it brings back, like, we were able to exit kind of the rat race, and we've come back to the family unit, and we support each other in what we want to learn and the experiences that we want to
Yeah.
have. And it's so much more relaxing. I'm not waking up at 5 in the morning to pack lunches and feed everyone breakfast and get them to school and then pick them up after school and drive them to their lessons. And yeah, we do a lot of driving as homeschool parents, but it's because we want to. We want to be at these events. And we don't have to then come home and do 3 hours of homework and then have it all start again in the morning. And then the weekend is spent with sports. So we spread that out. We have more hours in the day to just enjoy the process of learning as a family. I always call homeschooling like a learning lifestyle. We're not just learning between
Yeah.
these hours of the day, we're learning 24/7. So I think that that is super important for all parents to remember, that we are totally capable of teaching our children, and education does not have to look like it did in the classroom while we were growing up. Education can look very different. So that's the hardest part, is taking some time to deschool yourself, not even necessarily your kids, because the kids can kind of jump right into deschooling a lot of the time.
Mhm.
But parents are the ones that I find need to rebuild their confidence and to get that idea of education out of their mind. So that didn't really answer your question, but I thought that was important to talk about. I do. So like yesterday I was on a meeting, and the schools that were on that meeting were talking about, in order to track progress, because that was one of the things in AB 130, normally we check in every 20 school days with our teacher. So now there's these optional, like, daily instruction and daily check-in things that are required now. And so these schools were saying that now every day you're going to have to write down everything you did for every subject that you did. I'm sorry, I don't want to every day be writing down everything that we learned, because I want to be enjoying what we're learning. And then I want to be cuddling my kids at night before bed. I want to be,
Yeah.
doing whatever it is we're going to do that evening. I always loved that I could go to my meeting. My teacher could follow me on Facebook and see what we're doing. My teacher could sit with us and talk about all the things we did. She could look at our photo work samples. She could have conversations with the children. I don't feel like I need to be keeping a checklist of everything I'm doing every single day. We get far more done in a day. That was the one thing about my first teacher, was I was always worried, like, oh my gosh, we didn't get enough done. We didn't get enough done. And for her, at the very end of the learning period, I would just kind of sit down and do a brain dump, just because I felt like, oh, I need to help her because she was doing so much for me. I would sit down and write everything that I remembered that we had done. I'd look at all of our photos. I'd look at my calendar to see what field trips we'd been on. I'd write everything down. And so one day she sat me down at the meeting and she said, okay, Wendy, here's the list you gave me. And here's the list of things you were supposed to get done. My list was like 8 pages and her list was like this tiny little thing. And I'm like, oh, we're doing so much more than we're supposed to. So she said, like, Wendy, she goes, I always brag about you and your kids at my meetings, because like, you were so tied up in having to check off those boxes. And when I took those boxes away, you far exceed what a public school would be requiring of your children. So I always felt like that was a super confidence booster. Like, when you're enjoying the love of learning with your kids, trust me, you're exploring so much more than they would be getting in an 8-hour classroom day.
Yeah. But how would you address that parent who is saying, I don't know if I can homeschool without a charter right there with me. I don't know that I can do it without them. What would you say to
I
that,
would
since
kind
you've
of
got
want to
both
know.
perspectives?
I would want to know what part of the charter they're so reliant on. If they're
The
reliant
money.
on the money. Yeah. Like, I mean, that's something you just have to get out and try, because there's so many wonderful free resources that you can totally homeschool very inexpensively. The only thing you need to pay for is any classes you want to do at learning centers. So,
Right.
but you can probably budget for those. So I don't feel like anymore that the trade-off is worth it. I don't feel like you're getting enough money for the hoops that you're having to jump through. And the state just keeps coming down and trying to take these options away. And so we need to all come together and start defending our right to homeschool.
Yes, I agree. And that's where, at the beginning, I didn't have you say it, but you have the legislation take action page,
Yeah.
right? And so, how are you involved in finding out about that legislation? And how can anybody who's watching this jump on board with you and support the movement of really defending homeschool?
So, well, we defend homeschool in multiple ways. So I got involved in defending homeschooling back, I want to say, in 2017, 2018, when the legislature brought about that bill that they decided they were going to bring the fire marshal into our homes simply because we were homeschooling. There was a case, I believe, down here in Southern California.
Never heard that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was a big deal. There was an abuse case of a bunch of children, and one in one home. And so assembly members thought, well, we need to be going into those homes and making sure that child abuse isn't happening, because child abuse is happening in homeschool families, which child abuse happens everywhere. And child abuse is its own issue that we do need to solve.
Great.
But just because you're a homeschooler doesn't make you a child abuser. So
That's right.
we showed up and drove, and it was actually the chart, because I was not a private homeschool family at that time, but HSLDA was there, CHIA was there, CHN was there, HSC was there, everybody was there. And we also showed up as charter school parents who were part of charter schools, because we didn't want to see anything happen to private homeschooling in California. We wanted that freedom to exist, because we do identify ourselves as homeschoolers, even if we are with charter schools. So
Correct.
we defeated that bill. It never even got called for a vote. There was thousands and thousands of
wow.
like, they had to listen to us all day long. We walked through and said, like, I'm Wendy Eklund and I'm opposed to this bill. And so that's actually what got me started in it. And then the very next year, instead of going after private homeschooling, is when they started coming after charter schools and those that are homeschool families. So
and that has just sort of been the momentum that has continued.
Well, and I will tell you that the private homeschoolers don't show up to support the charter school homeschoolers, but we showed up to support them. So something I would like to change, because supporting and protecting school choice is an issue that all parents should care about, whether you're homeschooling or your child is in a district school, because you never know. Just like you and I, Michelle, we never thought we'd be homeschool parents. We thought our children would go through the education system. And then suddenly one day that didn't work, and we ended up being homeschoolers. So if you're a parent and you don't see the value in supporting other education methods, you need to think that you may have a child someday, or even a grandchild, who's not going to fit that model. And then you're going to need an alternate method. And we may not have any alternate methods. I mean, our legislature wants every child in their district neighborhood school.
Starting at 4 years old.
Yes, starting at 4. Right. So we need to all come together and support every option. Right.
Well, we're going to be promoting that with you for sure. And I'm really grateful that there are people who are actively involved in protecting parent choice in education, whatever that looks like.
Right.
I do think that we are in a season where there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and we're going to see a real turning of the tide in how parents no longer separate themselves. I'm a private homeschooler, I'm a charter homeschooler, I'm an unschooler. It's going to be parent choice. And I think that's a good thing, because we'll unify a lot of those voices. And as you just said, it will support and bring more opportunity for everyone. And that's a great thing. Yes. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the wave of people coming in, and that there are people like you and me and ILA and all of its people who really want to support homeschooling families. We don't really care how you get there, but just that you have that option available, and that we can empower them, have the confidence to keep going and not feel like there's really obstacles that make it unattainable.
Right.
And so while we still can, we should. Yeah. And that's the message that we hope we're putting out there. So thank you. And please,
Michelle, can I do one more plug for something else that people should look at?
Yeah, because I was going to say, tell us all of the websites that you would like people to check out. That's exactly where I was going.
So I think, one, it's really important to join some kind of homeschool association. So in California, we have CHIA, which is the Christian Home Educator Association, right? I always get the acronyms confused. And then we have HSC, which is, their acronym doesn't match their name, but it's just do a Google search for HSC Homeschool, and it's that association. And then CHN, which is the California Homeschool Network. And then if you want to join a national organization, it's HSLDA. And then also look at Homeschool Concierge, and we have a legislation page that you can look at. And then also you can follow us on Facebook. Legislation Take Action has a separate page than Homeschool Concierge, so you can follow both of those pages. And then Family Protection Ministries also watches legislation to see anything that will impact private homeschooling. So the difference between HSLDA and the other organizations and Homeschool Concierge is Homeschool Concierge watches anything that's going to impact education, period. And we really get involved in anything that's going to impact homeschooling and charter schools. But we are about school choice. So we'll even help parents navigate finding an alternative education program if homeschooling isn't for them. And then make sure that you're all following the new California School Choice Initiative. So a lot of people are fed up with the state trying to take away our opportunities for our students. And so we've taken it upon ourselves to create an initiative that we hopefully will have enough signatures to get it on the ballot and get a vote. So we're going to take it out of the hands of the legislature, and we're going to hopefully make this happen for ourselves. So also check out that page, California School Choice.
So maybe we can put links in the description.
Totally.
To all of these. I was trying to write them down so that I can make sure that we're promoting them as well, but that's a lot.
Nope, I'll put them all for you, Michelle.
Yeah. What's for people who are brand new, what's the difference between a homeschool association and a charter school? Because if I knew nothing, I wouldn't know. What's the difference there?
Right. Well, the homeschool associations have existed a very long time to support private homeschool families, not necessarily charter school families. So like take, for instance, HSLDA. If you're in a charter school and you're homeschooling, you can't join HSLDA. They won't support you they don't actually even consider you a homeschooler. You're considered a public school student. So most of the associations came about to support private homeschool families. A number of them, HSC and CHN, have seen the tide change and realize that a lot of homeschool families are in charter schools. So you can join those as a charter school family, but just know that they focus on legislation that's going to impact private homeschooling more than they focus on anything that's going to impact charter schools. They don't necessarily want to take a stance. Their mindset is that they don't want to take a stance on charter school legislation because they don't want legislators confusing homeschooling with public schooling. And I get it. But again, I keep saying, like, we need to all come together and support school choice. And I see like the teachers union gets backed by the labor unions, even though the labor unions aren't actually involved in education. And the teachers union get involved in legislation that's not actually education based. So we need to be doing the same thing because we have to fight against these people that are supporting each other when they have nothing to do with each other. And we are more closely tied than those things are tied together. So
yeah, and I agree with you. And I really hope that we will be coming together, but I do think it's important to recognize that just because you're going to be homeschooling, there is some different groups to support you in different ways.
Right.
And so one doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the other. And so even just to let people know that that's why you'll want to educate yourself, find out what it is that you need, because I know that there are those families that are just hoping and praying they can get in with a charter school. But if they can't, we need them to know that there is places where you can get framework, you can get help in learning what scope and sequences, you can get help in somebody who will come alongside you to build that framework of a home education without trying to force you into state standards and specific curriculum and checking all those boxes. And so it's great that there is so much in place that has been there a long time that can help everybody get through. So whenever I do a video, I always close with, hey, everybody, you can homeschool and we can help. Yes. And that is still true. Wendy can help, ILA can help, I can help. Like all of those things are there so that you can homeschool and homeschool the way that you want and the way that's available to you. We want to keep choices, right?
Yeah.
That's the objective. Yeah.
And
so
that's one of the great,
thank you.
Oh, real fast. That's one of the great things about the homeschool community is that every homeschool parent I know, if you like just mention at a park day or on Facebook or anywhere that you need help, you will literally have 300 people jumping in to help you. So there's plenty of help within our community. And again, Michelle and I are always here to help. I love that you close that way, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think it's so important to remind them There is no barrier right now. It only feels that way.
It does feel
But
that
right now
way. I
you
think
can
the
do it.
word,
You
yeah.
just need some help.
Yep,
Yeah.
need some help. Exactly. Well, good luck. Happy
Cool. Well, let's
homeschooling.
keep talking. What's that?
I said happy homeschooling.
Yes, happy homeschooling to everybody. And I want to keep hearing about what you're doing so we can keep putting it out to our community and keep it moving down the field.
Perfect.